Shalom from Jerusalem. My name is Shani Ferguson, and we're going to go through this morning's news cycle. Please excuse the noise. It is the loudness of Jerusalem, and there's nothing we can do about it. So here we go. Of course, if you have seen the news in the last 24 hours, one of the top stories is Israel bombed Qatar. So that's a little complicated. Let me just say a couple things about it. First of all, 2 days ago, there was a terrorist attack in Jerusalem, about a 5-minute drive from here, and 2 terrorists from a nearby Arab village went and pretended to be the ticket checkers. I don't know how you call it in English, and so they got on the bus and then they basically shot up a bunch of people, including a woman who was 8 months pregnant, killed 6 and wounded about a dozen others. And in response, Israel went to this little village, which is like 2 minutes from where we live, and took out tzavei harisa, which is basically the permits to destroy the homes of the families that belong to these terrorists, and is working to revoke several hundred work permits that come from that village. Now, in the West, you look at that and you're like, oh, collective punishment or whatever, but you have to understand in the Middle East how things work. The culture is very collective. The pressure is very collective. And so if anyone in a village gets wind that there is someone that's going to go commit a terrorist attack and they know that it's going to affect them, they will absolutely out them. And therefore, that local pressure is what Israel is trying to look to instill by revoking or potentially revoking these, or at least threatening to revoke the 750 work permits of Arabs that come from that village into Israel and work, which, by the way, no one owes them work permits. We're trying to have this coexistence thing. So then the next day, essentially being yesterday, Israel bombs Qatar. And right now we're waiting for the confirmation of who actually was taken out, but there is Hamas International. Hamas International is essentially a bunch of leaders they live in Qatar. They kind of bounce between Turkey and other countries that are okay with having terrorists in their country. They live in these like really, really fancy hotels, eat up, and enjoy the whatever luxurious Muslim life that exists in the Middle East. So Israel sends their planes over there yesterday and bombs the specific place where these Hamas leaders are. Now, why is this relevant on 25 different levels? First of all, because Israel bombed in Qatar, and Qatar is a country that is not involved in the war. They're supposed to be the intermediators between Israel and Hamas, and so it's supposed to be like this neutral area. However, Qatar is funding Hamas. Qatar is protecting Hamas. So Qatar is not this innocent entity. They're just an uninvolved entity, which is terminology that's worth learning when you're dealing with the Middle East. There's, innocent civilians, and then there's uninvolved. And the uninvolved aren't necessarily innocent. They're just not officially involved. So let me explain how to process this and watch the news at the same time, because the news at this point, whatever they're saying on the news, isn't really what's happening. And here's why. Anything you're hearing right now on the news about what America knew and what Qatar knew, you can just put it aside as this is the international game that's being played. And here's why. First of all, there's no way Israel would have gone into this type of operation without America knowing. And if you got a chance to see Trump's response when Israel was about to go and bomb Iran one last time because Iran, after the ceasefire, because Iran had fired a missile on Israel after the ceasefire, so it was like fair game. And then Trump blew up and he's like, they don't know what the blank they're doing. So that was actually angry Trump, because we ended up taking our planes, turning them around, and bringing them home and not bombing Iran. And we had to actually drop those bombs somewhere because you can't land planes with those bombs. So it was a big deal. Here, he's like, I'm not happy with what they did and all that. And Qatar is like, oh, we didn't know. And America's like, oh, we actually sort of found out because of our radars, we saw it on our radars. We called Israel for clarification, and they were already basically there when it happened. Plausible deniability, because if Qatar admits that they knew about it, then the whole Middle East is going to be like, oh, you sold Hamas out. But if America knew about it, then America just sold out Qatar, because Qatar just said that they were going to invest $1 trillion in America. So you have this very fine line of what's happening behind the scenes and what's happening in front of the world, because the Middle East is all about shame and honor and whatnot. And Israel definitely just shamed Qatar by knocking, out Hamas. So if Qatar has some sort of interests in Hamas not continuing this war in Gaza and being the stranglehold of why they won't release the hostages, because that's what they do. They sit there, they enjoy the luxury, they're not suffering in Gaza. So at some point, either Qatar was sick of mediating, or Israel and the US don't want Qatar to mediate. And so now Qatar's like, we're not involved in this anymore, and the mediation's gonna move to Egypt. Either way, what you should pay attention to is what the nations do now. Not what they're saying, who knew, when they knew, we knew 10 minutes after, America only knew 3 seconds before. All that is irrelevant. Pay attention to what they do. If Qatar actually attacks back in massive form, they really didn't know. If they do some sort of token response, they knew, and they're just trying to work things out behind the scenes. So that's the big news of the day. And of course, the other kind of side big news is that the UK finally came to the conclusion that Israel is not committing genocide. So first of all, we're very happy for the UK for finally understanding what we've understood for years, and especially during this war. It seems to be a move in the right direction, especially since there's been this kind of rising up of young Britons wanting to fly their own flag and taking down Palestinian flags and whatnot. And so UK, as much as it's been scary to watch them being taken over by Islam, it is fascinating to see that kind of patriotic, we love our country, we love our history, the good, the bad, and the ugly, but it is who we are, and we really love our culture, and we want to see it remain as the dominant part of the UK, and we can invite people in who have other cultures, but that doesn't mean we want their culture to replace ours. All that is fantastic. And we, as Israelis who love our history, are really excited for the UK, who is rising up and taking hold of their own culture and history. And it's fascinating that this is happening simultaneously, where there's this massive, massive march that is pro-Israel, and simultaneously a march that is very pro-UK native culture. Because in essence, the pro-Palestinian thing is all about Islamic taking over everywhere. And the pro-Israel spirit is all about every nation, tribe, and tongue having a place to call home. Until next time, I'm Shani Ferguson. Shalom from Jerusalem.